Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Star Wars Connection. I am your host, Felix, and today we will be talking about visual storytelling in The Force Awakens. So Harrison Ford said that the lightsaber duel between Rey and Kylo Ren was fantastic visual storytelling. But what did he mean by this? What elements go into visual storytelling? Some of the topics we'll be discussing include the symbolism of objects, use of color, and various filming techniques. And we'll also be bringing in some references to other movies within the Star Wars franchise, as well as classic and modern literature and film to aid us on our journey. But first, I'd like to welcome back Tina, who is an amateur film enthusiast.
Hey guys, how you doing?
And a very special welcome to our first-time podcaster, Becca, who has a background in film production and film study.
Hello, nice to meet you guys.
Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So just getting started on this introduction to the whole film, basically what we're going to do today is we're going to go from the start of the film to the end of the film and just hit as many of the things that we really noticed as a group that stood out to us as being particularly relevant to this fantastic visual storytelling. So the first thing that we wanted to start out with, and Tina, could you get us started on Rey and Kylo Ren's contrasting introductions?
Absolutely. So our first introduction to Kylo Ren is on Jakku after he lands on Jakku, and he is coming out of his brightly lit ship into the night. So what this signifies to me is coming from a light background. Of course, his parents are Han and Leia, and they've always been good people fighting on the side of right, the side of the righteousness. And of course, his uncle is Luke Skywalker, who's always been the hero of the trilogy. So he comes out of the brightly lit ship into the night, into the darkness. So that signifies where he's headed at the moment. Where Rey, when we meet her, she's introduced in a darkly lit abandoned Star Destroyer on Jakku, going about her day scavenging for, whatever she can find. And then she walks out into the brightly lit sun. What's also noticeable about in Rey's introduction is there are little beams of light coming through that Star Destroyer. So it could mean maybe her grandfather came from the light side and she has dark parents, or it could mean, if you ignore those little specks of light, especially the one coming from the top, maybe she comes from a dark background altogether. There's a lot of course, probably the biggest speculation to come out of The Force Awakens was Rey's parentage. So I really think this does signify her background when you look at from it in that perspective.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah.
And then, so really interesting contrast between Kylo Ren coming out of the brightly lit ship into the night, and then Rey going out of darkness into light. So it's cool imagery. And then we sort of move on to Rey on Jakku, and there's this really interesting imagery of her looking at this old woman who's scrubbing away at these scavenged parts. So it was interesting because we know that Rey's on a heroine's journey. We know that her journey is from girlhood and immaturity and being stuck in the past and focusing on her family into maturity and womanhood. So I think something that this could signify, this shot that we get of her looking at the old woman, is that if Rey stays on Jakku, this is what her life's going to be. This is what she's going to become.
Didn't someone confirm that as well? Might have been Pablo, or someone did confirm that, or someone, I remember reading it somewhere that it was like a symbolism of her and who she might become if she stays there. So I think you are right about that one.
That's interesting. I didn't know that it had been confirmed.
I think it had. This is a while ago, though. This is like at least 5 months ago or so that I heard
Okay.
I think it was Pablo, now that I think about it, because, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And it was, like, shortly after the film came out. And so that was... I had read that, and I think it was... I'm pretty sure it was Pablo that had said it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting.
So.
So, and then, speaking of family, another shot that we come to in the film is when Kylo Ren is watching the Hosnian system's destruction. He's watching it remotely from the finalizer, and they kind of start with the shot where it's his back, and you see what's going on, what he's seeing, and then they do this pan across his face, or his mask rather, so you can't see the facial expression that's going on underneath, but I got this distinct impression that it was almost like he's bearing witness, and especially when you take into account bloodlines, we know that the Hosnian system is most likely where Ben Solo grew up, which is it makes the shot sad in a way.
It does, yeah.
Because and then it reminds too of it's very reminiscent of Leia watching Alderaan being destroyed in A New Hope.
Yeah.
So possibly a parallel between mother and son there. And then it seemed like we had discussed some speculation too on if Ben or if Kylo Ren was watching his home world being destroyed and bearing witness to that act. There was a little bit of speculation on maybe it was him who sent Leia the data card that the Elenium system would be the next target. What did you guys think about that?
Well,
I think it's really interesting. Sorry, continue.
That's okay. So, to answer that question, what's also interesting is there's, between the meeting of Hux and Snoke, when they are, when Kylo Ren is meeting with Hux and Snoke, and Snoke decides that the Hosnian system, the weapon is charged, it's ready, and this is just going back to what an amazing actor Adam Driver is. Even when he's masked and you can't see his face and he's completely covered up, his body language indicates that he is not okay with this. He just looks at Snoke, and just with a turn of his head, you kind of know that, this is not what he wanted. So.
Yeah. And then you can contrast, I think, Kylo Ren and Adam Driver's amazing body language with his acting with Hux, seeing Hux give his fiery, enthusiastic Hitler callback speech, and it just so sharply contrasts with Kylo's presence on the ship watching the destruction. So, and interesting. I think those are the kinds of things that they put purposely in films to show you a contrast. And to point something out. So first you've got Hux giving his fiery speech, and he's obviously just fine with what's going on. And then you've got Kylo, who's just like this silent, brooding figure.
Yep. Yeah, you get the idea that he might be in over his head, that he joined with something, that's not really what his vision was, whatever. And we don't know what his vision is at this point, but you kind of get the idea that that's not what he signed up for, whatever this is.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
So, going back to Leia, so she's the first of the original trio that was introduced back in A New Hope, with her head being under a hood right in the beginning of the film. This can actually be taken as a direct parallel to her son, whose face is also hidden, of course. There's a hidden trope here involving reverse gender roles that shows he's actually a damsel in distress under Snoke's spell, just as Leia was held captive by Vader when we first meet her. So that's an interesting parallel between mother and son. And then what And then going back even further, if you go back to the prequels, there's also a parallel with Padme. When we're introduced to her, she's disguised from us from the very beginning. She's hidden from us using two extremes. She's a queen wrapped up in ornate, opulent costumes. She's barely recognizable at points. Like, in some cases, like, I'm like, that doesn't even look like Natalie Portman. You know, she's just so made up and just...
She hidden behind, there's another person playing her as well, pretending to be her as well, wasn't there?
Keira Knightley, I think, played...
Keira Knightley, yeah.
What was the character's name? I don't remember.
Was it Sabe?
Sabe, yes, that's it. Thank you. But yes, so you've got Keira Knightley and Natalie Portman at one time, and honestly, they're hard to tell apart. They're so, you know, made up. And so, then again, at the other extreme, you've got, you know, Padme, who's a simple handmaiden. You know, she's at the other end of the spectrum where, you know, she's very humble. You know, she's a servant. So we learn eventually that she's neither of these things, but then she's someone of far greater importance, you know, other than being just a figurehead on one end of the spectrum or a servant on the other. So, you know, she ended up being, you know, the mother of the twin Skywalkers. So, you know, she was very, you know, into her work as a senator, you know, wanting to, you know, do a greater good for the galaxy. So, you know, she's obviously a figure of far more importance than either of those two that she's introduced as. So, going back to characters who were introduced to us while wearing masks, we have the three characters who are each on their own journey in The Force Awakens. We have Rey, Finn, and Kylo Ren, who are introduced to us in the same exact way. We meet Rey as a nobody scavenger, and as the movie progresses, we realize this couldn't be further from the truth. She's definitely somebody of importance. We just don't know the details yet on who she is or where she came from or why she was dropped off on Jakku, but she's obviously more than a scavenger. Finn is a stormtrooper. Stormtroopers have a reputation for being unthinking drones, only being told what they're to do as they're told, and, you know, sometimes they're not even that great of shots, but, you know, that's that's neither here nor there. Finn at one point, you know, in the very beginning of the movie, and this is interesting as well, because this is at the point where Kylo Ren looks at him, knows that he didn't take a shot, and completely lets him go. Again, this is a great example of visual storytelling, because, you know, you realize that, you know, Kylo Ren isn't just a villain. There's something else going on, and I think that aspect right there kind of tells us, you know, there's more to it than that.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's immediately shown to us. Exactly.
So Finn rebels, and then shows us repeatedly that, you know, that he's nothing like that. He definitely has a mind of his own, very capable of making his own decisions, to the point where he wants to leave both the First Order, and after he gets involved with the Resistance, he wants to leave the Resistance too. So he's definitely got a mind of his own. And then, of course, there's Kylo Ren. Giving the precedent now set by the previous two, he's definitely not who we're supposed to think he is, and there's much more to this story than what we're given. So what's interesting about this is Kylo Ren has not given up his mask yet. So he's still, probably out of the three characters I just described, he's got the most development that needs to happen, because he still has not given up his mask.
Yeah, because the other two, they abandon it like immediately, right within the first few moments of the film, really, don't they?
Yeah.
Whereas Kylo Ren kind of takes it off, puts it back on, takes it off. You know, it's like, and it's also, he always has it sort of by his side. It's like I always kind of see it as like a slight security blanket thing he's got. Like he keeps it at his side. It's always watching. Like in the interrogation scene, it's there. Even when, you know, later he kills his dad, it's still there, like sort of hovering over him. And I agree. I think it's sort of supposed to represent that he's got a lot of development to do before he finally abandons that part of himself.
Yep.
I remember in the Blu-ray, the costume designer, or someone said it in the Blu-ray, said it makes him feel more powerful when he wears it. I just picked that immediately from that
definitely
Blu-ray. It was it was interesting. And there's also that thing about, sorry.
No, that's okay. You can see it too when he takes it off. You know, he's definitely not the imposing, foreboding figure that he makes himself out to be. Mm-hmm. So I like as far as saying it's a security blanket, that is very, very true.
Yeah, he's got to hide his emotions.
Yep.
He doesn't have a good poker face at all.
No, he has a terrible poker face.
He does. He hovers between Ben and Kylo Ren as well, and I think that kind of is a symbolism of that as well. Like the fact he takes the helmet off, keeps it on. It's supposed to also sort of show how he's hovering between two personalities in this film. It seems that sometimes Ben will show through, and then other times Kylo Ren will be there. You know, so it's quite interesting.
It is used the mask is used as a symbol like that. And what's really interesting too, I think, is that even with the mask on, you get a lot of emotional portrayal. I don't even like that's talent.
It is.
Sometimes when he even has it off, he still does quite terrible things as well. So it's not like when the mask is off, it's Ben.
Yeah.
It's just he's really conflicted.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter sometimes even if he's wearing the mask or not wearing the mask. It just, his personality flips back and forth anyway, kind of thing as well. So it's interesting.
And when he walks with his fists clenched, I mean, his fists are constantly clenched, and he's, just got this, like, you can see the pent-up rage. Even though he's completely covered, you can, like, feel the rage underneath him.
Yeah.
For sure. And then, speaking of, like, kind of how Kylo is visually presented in general, there's some interesting... there's some interesting symbolism that they have with the lightsaber. And people mention like it looks like a Knights Templar, or he's kind of coded that way. But I really found Adam Driver's quote about the lightsaber interesting. Like he said in interviews that the lightsaber is a metaphor of the character, and that you get the sense that it may or may not work at any given moment.
And it's crackling, isn't it? It's a mixture of two colours as well. It's red and orange, or I think yellow and red. Sorry, and it's like crackling and all the time, like it might break and stuff.
Like it might not work.
Yeah,
which is, and that was it was a really cool way to show that. That kind of thing is, I find when I'm reading or viewing films or reading books, I find that to be really common with characters, is to use color coding. And so I'm going to go through a few characters that are color coded like Kylo Ren, and you're gonna probably notice some patterns here. So with the black and white color coding, one thing that it can be used for is to signify this black and white thinking. So a character who thinks in terms of absolutes, like you would say Sith deal in absolutes. So Kylo, he's got his pale skin, he's got his dark hair, he dresses all in black. So that can be something that tells you, like, okay, this guy, he thinks he's right and everyone else is wrong, and has a very narrow worldview that he's going to have to grow out of. And then these types of characters, too, if they have red in their coding, usually the red tends to signify like anger or rage issues, which is, we see Kylo throwing his tantrums and doing that sort of thing. So that's and like you said earlier, he keeps his fists clenched, so a lot of bottled up rage that eventually comes out. But some of the characters that you might recognize, Severus Snape doesn't have the red coding, but he's black and white color coded, so you can you get a sense that he's a character who thinks in terms of black and white. And if you look at the story, he treats Harry like crap because he still has a beef from his childhood with Harry's dad. So, and it's kind of this all or nothing thinking where it's, your father was no good and you're no good too. And then, of course, we know that through his character arc, he comes to atone for his part in Harry's mother's death. Another character from Buffy the Vampire Slayer is Spike. So, pale vampire with white blonde hair. He dresses in black and red. Guy has major rage issues. I mean, that's an understatement for Spike. But
Sorry, just thinking of him. He's funny. He's a good character.
Yeah. I really want to watch that show after, much
It's
discussion.
so good, you're missing out.
I gotta watch it.
But similar story here. So Spike also has kind of this redemption arc where he starts out just awful, and then over the course of the story, it's kind of a slow progression, but he eventually atones and makes a major change. And then just a couple of others to mention, I'll just go over them briefly. One example is Prince Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender. He also has a redemption arc. He's pale with black hair. He even has a scar across his face, and rage issues. He's a firebender, so he has to deal with his anger and rage, and then ends up becoming one of the good guys. And the last one was, some people might recognize this if they play video games. It's Shadow the Hedgehog from the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise. Black, white, and red, rage issues, has a redemption. So there's a pattern here, is what I'm saying. And yeah, they're tragic characters who end up overcoming their issues, and they end up atoning for their misdeeds in some manner. So my point being, Kylo's not a new character. We've seen him before countless times, down to how he is visually presented in The Force Awakens. So he's not new. And then, again, going on, talking about Kylo, there's this interesting cut scene, and we'll bring Rey in here too. There's a cut scene between Kylo Ren's "What girl" moment with poor Mitaka, and he's reaching his hand toward the right as he grabs Mitaka. And then they cut to Rey, and she's fixing the hyperdrive on the Millennium Falcon, and then she's reaching toward the left. So if you put them side by side, it appears that they are reaching for each other. So it's cool in terms of the story because as it says in the novelization, they're inexorably drawn to each other. And both of them, from the moment that they hear about each other, do seem to be drawn to each other. So with Kylo Ren, it's "What girl?" And Rey has that look of wonder on her face when Han starts talking about one boy, an apprentice. So just a really interesting way to show that with the film.
Yeah. That abrupt cut, the scene you were talking about a moment ago, where, what's his name? Makato, is that his name?
Mitaka.
The man that gets choked. Yeah. Yep. It's a really I found it a really interesting cut. Because Finn and Rey are having this sort of moment where they're talking, and it's all friendly and nice, and then this alarm goes off, and then they're quickly running like, "Oh my god, what's this?" And then it cuts to, in the 3D version especially, there's like a protruding, is it Star Destroyer ship? Is that what it is?
I think it's a Star Destroyer.
Yeah, it's like sticking out of the screen, and that's something I noticed in the 3D version. I think I've seen it a few times, but I don't think there's many protruding shots like that in the actual 3D version of the film. So it's almost like a suggestion that it's cutting into this moment. Like it was a bit of an odd cut, I'll be honest. I thought it was really abrupt and strange. And then when you actually see what's going on, so he finds out about the girl, chokes that guy, he smashes up the ship and everything like that. So it's a big, terrible, terrifying moment where this guy's like, "What girl?" Like, he's coming for this girl. And then it cuts back to Rey, and the alarm is going off and alarm bells are ringing, so you immediately tie them together. And also what ties the scene together is when, after Kylo Ren has smash the wall behind him, it flashes white, and as it cuts back to Rey, the background is white, so it's deliberately integrating these two scenes together through the use of like editing, so it sort of flows seamlessly in a sense. And I think I remember like Rey saying, "I need the bonding tape. I need to get the bonding tape," or something like that. I remember she was yelling at Finn about it. I found that quite interesting, the whole bonding thing. If there is some kind of story going to happen now where she is important or a key to Kylo's redemption, then the bonding tape line later on, if you look at it, it might sort of make it's like a little bit of an Easter egg, I think, suggesting what's going to happen in later films, if that makes sense.
That is great. I've never noticed that before. That's good.
No.
I hadn't either. And you know, it's another one of those things that there's a big use of, or there seems to be a big use of mechanical parts and everyday objects to suggest where the story is going. But we'll get more into that as we get like deeper in scene by scene. But that's a really good observation. I had totally missed the bonding tape.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
And then so a bit later, so fast forwarding a bit later, we'll get into our really interesting imagery. It seems like I've talked about phallic imagery on several podcasts, so I'm going to be known as that lady. But we have when Kylo Ren first meets Rey in the forest on Takodana, we get this shot of he's approaching her and the lightsaber is kind of held in this suggestive position. It's like if you imagine you're holding a lightsaber and you're walking towards someone and just or actually stand up and do it. That's a weird position to hold your hand in. It felt like it to me, like it felt awkward. But it seems to be like it's held at hip level, so it seems to be an image that suggests something rather sexual. And then he approaches, and we've got this lightsaber in Rey's face. And so when this imagery is pretty common to the heroine's journey, and I'll reference here a modern heroine's journey in fantasy, so that you get an idea. So if you've seen The Labyrinth, Jareth the Goblin King is kind of this epitome of enticing but frightening male sexuality. And in their very first encounter, when Jareth shows up in Sarah's parents' bedroom window, he ends up throwing a snake in her face. And so it's the same idea. It's this phallic imagery. It's a phallic symbol. And the idea that you're getting with this is because the heroine's journey, remember, is about moving from childhood and innocence to mature womanhood. So there's the idea that when she's first confronted with this blatant male sexuality, she's intimidated by it. Mm-hmm. And then he approaches her, he moves close in, and Becca, I think I guess that was me. So, what was interesting about him moving in close is when he's first initially just reading her mind, it's the first time in the film that we're seeing proximity to suggest intimacy, and this is also a common trick in film. Is if you place you can have suggestive blocking and proximity of your characters to suggest that there's some sort of intimacy that's either currently going on or will go on. So there's this really interesting shot, and it took some effort to get this particular shot, but when you go to the battle that's taking place on Takodana, and then you go back to Rey and Ren, and he is the first shot there, he's leaned in, and it almost looks like he's whispering in her ear. Mm-hmm. It's a really weird position. And then when he's reading her mind, his hand is closer to her face than it was with Poe. It's almost touching her. So here we're seeing contrast too. So when you have two of the same scene, in either a film or a book, like, you don't do that unless you're using it to show for your reader or your audience to compare or contrast. So
yeah, that's true.
You're supposed to be comparing, like, you're supposed to notice a difference. So he didn't get that close to Poe. He's for some reason drawn to get closer to Rey. That's something you're meant to notice. And then, well, talking about this in film in general, the example I'm going to bring in here is in The Matrix, in the beginning of the film, you have Neo and Trinity meet. And it's not until the very end of the film that they kind of consummate their mutual feelings for each other with the kiss of life. But in the beginning of the film, you still suggest intimacy. So what they do is on their first meeting, she is close into him. She comes in. They've got choker shots. She's whispering in his ear. And textually what's happening is nothing romantic, because she's just introducing him to the idea that through her, he can come and meet Morpheus and find out what the Matrix is. But the subtext of what you're seeing visually is that although there isn't any at the moment, what there will be is intimacy between the two characters. And then, of course, like I said, we see that play out in the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing to notice kind of about this whole Takadana sequence, and we talked about this a lot before in other episodes, but there's the bridal carry, or the monster carry, or however you want to call it. But what's interesting to me about it is they were shown 4 shots of the carry. So it's not like it was just a 1 or 2 and go. Like, 4 shots of it, to me, says that they really wanted to hammer the idea home. And so your first 3 shots, your first shot is he initially catches her. The second shot is from Han's point of view, so Han sees it. Third shot, Finn sees it. And they really could have stopped there because we see through Han and Finn's perspective that he is carrying her toward the ship, so we know what's going on. But what they did to really sell the idea was show him carry her across the threshold. So they made sure that they got this shot in. So you see, which is, it's something that we associate with being married. So there seems to be this metaphorical idea of a marriage that could be suggested. But what you can take from this, because you see these shots either in monster movies or when there's an actual romance happening. So to me, as a viewer, it should tell me one of 2 things. It should tell me baseline, villainous crush, and beyond that, possible future romance.
Okay.
I think at this point, given his villain status, I think it's both.
I agree. I think it's both.
Yeah. And that it's like, people have all kinds of different theories about who Rey is, but for me, that shot was that's the they're not cousins shot.
Yeah,
definitely. That's the point where you it's like a checklist, and that's
right.
like you have to unmark at least 2 people off of that list that could possibly be her parents, mainly Luke and Leia. It's too entwined with
romance for that to be cousins. It's just too iconic an image for that to resemble a cousin carrying his cousin. It just doesn't work in film.
Yep.
Right. And especially when it's, so there's context here too. So we also see later on Chewie carry an injured Finn aboard the Millennium Falcon. But that doesn't suggest like Finn Baca, the ship you never knew you wanted. It's a Wookiee.
It's 2 male characters. It's 2 male characters. It's not entwined in this whole romance imagery that we've seen.
And one of them is injured too, so there's context to it. But when you have a young, healthy man, and he's masked, but then he takes off the mask, he ends up being beautiful underneath the mask. So young, handsome, fit man carrying a young, beautiful, fit woman across the threshold. that connotes something very specific.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
So, going back to that, the connection between Kylo Ren and Rey, there's actually some Easter eggs thrown in throughout the film that kind of hint at their future trajectory. And it's to the point where these are just the list of the ones that I know about, and there may even be more. I mean, we've found collectively over the past several months probably at least over a dozen of these throughout their scenes, and they're little hidden hearts throughout all of their scenes. And there's some speculation. These could be accidental on the filmmaker's part, which I understand. But when you have that many of them spread out throughout the film, you start to realize these probably aren't accidental. So I'm going to go through a list of where all of these can be found. And the first one that I ever noticed, and they're actually visible in the interrogation scene, but you would have to zoom in on the camera, which, we're going to provide pictures for these so you can see them for yourselves and decide. But Kylo Ren has little reflective hearts in his eyes that when you look at them and, if you kind of decipher them, it almost looks like they don't look natural, to me at least. It doesn't look like natural reflection of like coming from anywhere else. And Rey doesn't have them in her eyes either, but they're definitely in the shape of hearts. There's no really, when you look at them, and the images don't change throughout the entire scene. They're stuck there, and they don't change shape. They're just constantly there, and they're static. So that was, when I first saw that, I was taken aback. I'm like, wow, that was pretty. Once you see it, it's not something that is gonna. You're definitely gonna question why they would put that in there.
You can't unsee it.
Yeah, you can't unsee it, for sure.
Right. And especially compared to the other lights in his eyes, I think, because those, there are stage lights in his eyes too, and those seem to move around. But what look like to be hearts are, like you said, they're static. So it's weird.
It is weird, and they never change throughout the scene. They're there from the point he takes off his mask, and they're there from the point that he leaves the room when he's shocked when she calls him out on being a Darth Vader fanboy. So, there's also Hearts in the Woods where they first meet. There's a shot where he has Rey frozen in place through the Force in a Force lock, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. She's on the far left of the screen, and he's on the far right. And I've counted at least 3 or 4. There might be more. There's probably more than that. They're a little more subtle, though. I don't know if they're on purpose or not. But there's at least 4 that look, they're very most definitely in the shape of hearts, and they're set up right between them. What's really interesting is that there's another scene between Han and Leia in the trees, again on Tokadana, where Han is placed kind of in the same way. You've got Han on the far right and Leia on the far left, standing next to her ship. And when you look at the trees, they have these same hearts, these same heart shapes, but they're split down the middle. So, which is kind of sad. I understand, if that's true and on purpose, what they're trying to drive home there. So there's that. And then there's also, after he leaves the interrogation, to go complain to Snoke that he can't get, that she's strong with the Force. He can't get the map out of her head. He just needs his guidance. There's actually a heart surrounding him in the shape of it's in the mist there, and it's surrounding him. So again, if that's purposely done, I think it's like, Kylo, you better hide that because Snoke can see that. You better put that away right now. So,
well, in the novel they do say there, don't they?
Yeah.
The scene was cut where in that exact exact moment. I think following on from that moment where you see this, if this heart is around him, Snoke calls him out on the compassion he has for her.
Absolutely.
So you might be onto something there, I think.
Yep. And then there's also Hearts and Rey's vision when she sees him in the woods. They're spread out, kind of similar. There's and this is going by memory, but I think they're either in the mist or in the woods themselves. In the final snow fight, when she has his red lightsaber pointing towards the ground and her blue one is up, the smoke that is coming from the red lightsaber is also in the shape of a heart. So you can kind of, see that and judge for yourself. But and then most recently, I found a couple in the bridal carry as well. When he first swoops her up and picks her up, there's a couple. There's at least two in there, and then the final one, the one that I know of, when one of the stormtroopers comes up to him on Takodana and says the droid was seen heading west with a girl. On the emphasis on girl, there's a heart shape right at the point where it says girl. There's a heart shape in the flames that are to his right, and it's very quick. But once you see it, that one was pretty blatant to me.
Take a look at that one, because that one I have never seen before.
Yeah, I actually found that recently, just kind of like, I wonder what this is. And then sure enough, there it was. And I also showed it to a couple people I know in person, and they saw it too. So, and then
mention the one with the ground breaks. There's one with the ground breaks.
Yes. Where the ground breaks, he is laying in the snow with his face slashed. And the ground is broken in not a way that you would think it would break naturally. And he's actually surrounded by kind of a heart. The cliff is in the shape of a heart where he's laying.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. That one's a really prominent one.
Yeah, that one is pretty prominent.
Yeah.
And then finally, this is not a heart, but if they're trying to drive home, and again, there's debate whether, this might not be, what the filmmakers intended. But again, it's one of those things where once you see it, it cannot be unseen. And if they're trying to drive home that these two aren't cousins, this is probably the best way to do it. In the interrogation, Kylo Ren has his hand up to Rey when he's reading her mind, and his pointer finger is in the shape of it's in the shape of a penis. Again, we're going to show, throughout the video, we're showing you these, and, there it is. So we just, decide for yourselves what that's supposed to mean. And, I don't know. Do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it was one of those things that, like, once it jumped out, it was like, oh God, I've got to show people this. But but we actually, we discussed it because it was like, no, that can't be what they were doing. Surely not. That's just, it's just us being dirty, but
Disney has a history of doing this, though.
Right, they do.
Yeah.
The Little Mermaid.
The Little Mermaid, exactly.
Right. But there was the tip of his glove looks different than how it does in other scenes. It almost looks like there was a tip sewn onto it. And I can't go any further with that.
It's just one of those things. Decide for yourself, and
see the picture, decide.
Exactly.
Yep. This concludes part 1 of our podcast discussing visual storytelling in The Force Awakens. I'd like to give a special thank you to our contributors and viewers. If you have a comment or question, please leave it on YouTube or Twitter, or you can contact us directly at StarWarsConnection09@gmail.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you.